Hi, I'm Dr. Andy Berkowski with ReLACS Health, and today I want to talk to you about 5 tips that can improve your sleep. And this applies to any human being because we all sleep. So this is for everyone. So number one is to wake up at the same time every day. So a lot of the grandparents and their old mythology about you got to go to bed at the same time every night, that's in some ways that's true. You do want to go to bed at around the same time every night, but that only works if you wake up at the same time every day. And it comes down to the body's biological clock. So we have what's called a circadian rhythm. So I took Latin in high school, and it's pretty useless. Not a lot of people to talk to in Latin anymore. Not a lot of Roman consuls walking around these days. But circa and dien means around the day, or the 24-hour clock that goes around the day in a 24-hour cycle. And that circadian rhythm, which is part of the area of the brain in the hypothalamus, which controls our biological clock, and some award-winning Nobel Prize-winning research has gone into this as recently as a couple of years ago. But what happens is that the day is set by when we wake up and not by when we go to bed. Our bedtime is actually set based on when we wake up. So if you wake up at the same time every day and then you're awake for say 16, 17 hours, then you're right around the clock back to your bedtime, and then you sleep around 7 to 8 hours. But the key is to wake up every day, and that's what sets the biological clock. Jet lag is an example of this in that the time that you wake up is shifting. So you go from California to Indiana, you're moving 3 hours in your time zone. It's not really the bedtime that's changing that is affected. It's the time you're waking up. It's 3 hours earlier from what your body is used to. So once you start waking up at the same time every day, about 7 to 8 hours or so before you wake up is when your body will be ready to go to bed. So you got to think of roosters, or even if you know young children, that the rooster wakes up basically in concert with the sunlight pretty much at the same time every day if you're on a farm. Or if you have young children or know of young children, no matter when you put them to bed, they're going to be waking up and coming into your room at the exact same time every day. And that's how our clock should be. So if you can't wake up naturally at the same time, which most people nowadays cannot, you do want to set an alarm and get your body trained to be waking up at the same time. So that's the most important tip I can give you, and that's number one. Number two is to get 30 minutes of exercise every day, either moderate to intense exercise. This is great for your health, your mood, your metabolic system, but it's also great for your sleep. So there's probably 2 times I would recommend during the day that to get exercise. Any exercise is better than no exercise, no matter what time of the day, except right before bed. But morning is probably the second best time. It's easy to fit that, easier, I would say, to fit that into your schedule first thing in the morning. But if you think about back to our ancestral days, we didn't wake up and go to the refrigerator and get food. You had to wake up usually with sunlight, go hunt, kill that antelope, and now you'd have your breakfast for the day. So you actually did maybe have to exercise at the beginning of the day to gather or hunt for food. So it's the same for us. We could get up, wake up. It could stimulate our brains, stimulate our minds, get our metabolic system going. So that would be probably the second best time. But then the absolute best time is about 4 to 6 hours before bed. And that seems to work well from a performance standpoint, but also for a circadian or biological clock standpoint, because when you're exercising, your core body temperature starts to heat up. And after you're done exercising, your core body temperature will gradually cool. And that period over 4 to 6 hours as you approach bedtime seems to be ideal. So if you go to bed at 11 o'clock, exercising between, say, 5 and 7, maybe after work or after school, those would be great times, both from a performance standpoint and from a sleep standpoint. And just from watching the U.S. Open tennis, it seems like Right before bed, not so good because you're actually heating up the core body temperature and overstimulating the mind. So some of these matches that were ending at like 1, 2 a.m., probably not great. It's probably going to be hard for them to fall asleep and have a good night of sleep, not only just staying up that late, but actually getting intense physical exertion right before bedtime. So tip number 3 is kind of on the heels of exercising too late at night, is to create a buffer zone between the daytime and the nighttime. So with these, I guess, tennis players staying up till 1 a.m. exerting themselves, you can't just go from exerting yourself to boom, you're asleep. You're not a Formula One race car. You're not going to go from 60 to 0 in split second. Sleep fundamentally is a physical state, and the physical state will be suppressed by the mind. The mind has the ability to suppress the physical state when it comes to sleep. So sleep is actually a state of inactivity of the mind. You have to actually have your mind relax, and that will allow your body to physically enter a state of sleep. So if you're doing anything prior to bedtime that's overactive of the mind, that will prevent you from falling asleep, or it will decrease your sleep quality. So picking up a relaxing activity prior to bedtime, whether it's prayer or meditation or light reading, whatever it might be, that relaxes your mind is what's best. You don't want to work all the way until bedtime. You don't want to be watching TV or the news right before bedtime, because you want your mind to be relaxed as you're heading to bed. So that segues into tip number 4, which is in the same buffer zone period, is to turn off media and entertainment. So again, media in some ways is to inform you, but in part it's entertainment. But entertainment is activation of the mind. So a lot of research has come out, particularly out of Chuck Czeisler's lab at Harvard and Jamie Zeitzer at Stanford, that there's negative effects of artificial light, or tablets, cell phones, televisions right before bed. So there is some component of the actual light that we're not supposed to get before bedtime. But even worse, it's turning out to be, is the actual content of what's on those things. So the content of what's on the tablets is even worse than the light in terms of overactivating the mind. So what's on news channels nowadays, or what's on social media, it's about the upcoming elections, it's about wars going on. Generally, it's not going to be things, or it might be something entertainment like a TV show, but are you really supposed to be entertaining your mind when you want your mind to shut off? So that's kind of the issue. So this comes back to our evolutionary roots, in which if we were sleeping in a cave and there's a bear prowling around, the last thing we want to do is to fall asleep and be sleeping soundly when there's a bear outside the cave. Well, that television show, the social media, the news you're reading on your tablet, that is all that prowling bear. And so it's our modern version of the prowling bear. And you don't want that to be occurring right before bed. And the 5th tip related to your sleep is to actually relax. Worry less about your sleep. Again, sleep requires a deactivated state of mind. So one of the things you don't want to worry about is how much sleep you're getting. You want to actually give yourself sufficient sleep, but you don't want to fixate on, well, is it 7 hours, or I didn't get my 7.5, or I didn't get my 8. Well, if you're somebody who needs 7 hours of sleep and you're worried about getting 8 hours of sleep, that's going to affect your sleep quality. So make sure you're not sleep depriving yourself. That's part of everyone's problem. But the other half is people are worrying too much about sleep. So sleep is one of the things in which, because you require this inactive state of the mind, the more you work on your sleep, the more you worry about it, the worse it gets. So practice makes it worse. So that gets back into the things like deactivating the mind, creating that buffer zone. But really, you really want to not worry about your sleep as much, and just kind of follow good routines, good sleep hygiene, and not worry about it. Now, people can develop conditions, one of them being what we call insomnia disorder or chronic insomnia, where it's this perpetual state of activating the mind, and that requires certain treatments, including cognitive and behavioral therapy. So if that's your case, then you may want to talk to a doctor about treatment for that. But in general, a typical person, the more you worry about your sleep, the worse it's going to be, particularly if you're worrying about it while you're sleeping or right before sleep. So those are my 5 tips for everyone in terms of ways you can improve your sleep. You could read, I wrote about this in my blog. So if you go to sleeprls.com/blog, you could read about this and the other topics that I will have. And again, the typical medical disclaimer, this video is for informational or educational purposes only. It does not constitute medical advice. If you're going to make changes, please involve your healthcare provider. Assuming you're not one of my own patients, I'm happy to have you as a patient, but everyone else, consult your medical provider before using any of this information. It is at your own risk. Until next time, remember, one of the keys to sleeping well is to relax.